You think serving your country earns you respect. You think a courtroom will protect the truth. I thought so too, until the day a judge laughed in my face, and 5 minutes later he was the one in handcuffs. The crutches clicked against the marble floor with every step I took. Click, drag, click, drag. I could feel them watching, the security guards, the clerks, even the families waiting for their cases. Their eyes slid over me like I was dirt tracked in from the street, not a man who had once worn the uniform they claimed to honor. The left side of my body ached like hell, an old souvenir from Afghanistan. But I held my head high. I had to. The double doors to the courtroom loomed ahead, heavy and mean. I swallowed hard and pushed through. Inside it was colder. Not from the air conditioning, but from the way the people turned to stare at my limp, at my crutches, at my skin. The bailiff barely looked at me when he called out, "Marcus Reed, State versus Reed. Step forward." I hobbled to the defendant's table where my lawyer, Jasmine Carter, sat scribbling notes furiously. She looked up at me, her jaw tight, her eyes fierce. "Deep breath," she whispered. "They want you angry. Don't hand it to them." I nodded once, feeling the pressure mounting in my chest. Then he walked in. Judge Alton Prescott, tall, silver-haired, eyes cold as a snake's. His black robe swished as he climbed onto the bench, carrying himself like a king presiding over peasants. He didn't even glance at me, not at first. He shuffled some papers, tapped his gavel lazily, and then, with a slow, deliberate motion, fixed his gaze on me. The smirk came first, then the words. "Well, well," he said, voice dripping with disdain. "Look what the army dragged back." The courtroom rippled with quiet chuckles. My hands tightened around the handle of my crutch. Jasmine pushed back her chair slightly, ready to object, but I gave her the smallest shake of my head. "Not yet." Judge Prescott leaned forward, elbows on the bench. "Tell me, Mr. Reed," he said loudly, "is panhandling part of basic training now? Or is that just a personal specialization?" A few people laughed harder this time, cruel, sharp laughter that echoed around the marble walls. I felt the heat rising up my neck. I felt every eye drilling into me like I was nothing, less than nothing. But I locked eyes with the judge. I spoke slowly, clearly. "I served with honor, Your Honor," I said, "and I carry the scars to prove it. I wonder what scars you carry, besides arrogance." The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Prescott's nostrils flared. His hands clenched the armrests of his chair so hard his knuckles whitened. "You will watch your tone in my courtroom," he barked, banging the gavel once. A sharp, angry crack. "This is not a Veterans Day parade. You're here because you couldn't keep your hands to yourself." "I'm here," I said, voice steady, "because someone decided a black man on crutches must be a criminal." Gasps murmured around the room. Prescott's face turned a shade darker, his jaw ticking. "You think pulling the race card will save you?" he sneered. "In my court, you're just another defendant. Nothing special." Jasmine stood now, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Objection, Your Honor. The court is supposed to be impartial, not personal." Prescott waved her off like she was a mosquito. "Sit down, Miss Carter, or I'll hold you in contempt." The bailiff shifted at the side of the room, hand resting lightly on his holster. I saw it all, felt it all. Every trap they were setting, every assumption about who I was and what I deserved. But I also saw something else, the faint glint of cell phones raised in the audience. Recording, watching, documenting. They thought I was alone. They were wrong, because the world was about to see what real injustice looked like. And this time it would be his name in the headlines, not mine. I squared my shoulders as best I could, planting my crutches firm on the ground. "Proceed," Prescott barked, glaring at Jasmine. "Let's get this sideshow over with." But deep down he had no idea. The real show was just getting started. The prosecution started with a smug confidence, tossing around accusations like they were tossing scraps to dogs. They called me aggressive, unstable, volatile, words sharpened like knives, designed to cut away my humanity. They put a woman on the stand, a store clerk, who said I looked suspicious the day of the incident. No theft, no assault, just suspicion. That was enough. Jasmine stood slowly, every movement deliberate, like she was uncoiling a hidden blade. She adjusted her glasses, looked the witness dead in the eye. "Ma'am," she said, voice calm but loaded with warning. "Can you describe exactly what made Mr. Reed look suspicious?" The woman fidgeted. "Well, he was loitering, and he was looking at the cash register." Jasmine arched an eyebrow. "So, to be clear, standing in line at a convenience store and glancing at the counter is suspicious behavior?" The woman's face flushed. "I mean, not for everyone, but, Jasmine pressed. The woman swallowed. "But he was big. And, black." Gasps filled the courtroom. Someone dropped a pen. Judge Prescott banged his gavel furiously. "Enough. Move on, Miss Carter." Jasmine turned, her voice icy. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I thought the truth was the foundation of this courtroom." The judge glared at her like he wanted to tear the words out of her throat. I sat there, breathing slow and deep, feeling the familiar cocktail of rage and humiliation swirling inside me. This wasn't about justice. It never was. When the prosecution finished their weak parade of witnesses, it was our turn. Jasmine called me to the stand. I gripped my crutches tighter as I made my way up. Every step echoed like a drumbeat. I raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. Jasmine's voice softened. "Marcus, why were you at the store that day?" "My car broke down 2 blocks away," I said. "I needed a phone charger to call for help. I'd just come from a VA appointment. I was tired. I was hurting. But I wasn't stealing anything. I had $20 cash in my pocket." She nodded. "Did you threaten anyone?" "No, ma'am." "Did you raise your voice?" "No, ma'am." "What happened after you paid for the charger?" I looked out at the courtroom, forcing myself not to flinch at the rows of hostile eyes. I never made it to the register. Before I could even pull out my wallet, the police stormed in. Said I fit the description of a robbery suspect. Jasmine leaned in. "And did they say what that description was?" I let a bitter laugh slip out. "Big, black, on crutches." The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the lights. Prescott shifted uneasily on the bench, tapping his pen against the wood. Jasmine let the silence stretch. She knew its weight would crush them better than any speech could. "Thank you, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice thick with emotion. No further questions. When the prosecution tried to cross-examine, they stumbled. Asked me if I had a history of violence. "Only on battlefields," I said. "Defending a country that sometimes forgets men like me exist." The jury looked uncomfortable. Some glanced away. Some finally looked at me like a human being. Maybe for the first time. It should have been a clean finish. But Prescott had other plans. When closing arguments began, he interrupted Jasmine so many times, so aggressively, that even the court reporter looked up in disbelief. "You're grandstanding, Miss Carter," he barked. "You're wasting the court's time. You're trying to win sympathy, not justice." Jasmine stood her ground. "I'm trying to remind the jury that justice doesn't come with conditions, Your Honor." That was when it happened. The bailiff leaned down and whispered something in Prescott's ear. His face paled. He looked up, eyes darting to the back of the room. Two men in dark suits had entered the courtroom. Federal agents. They approached the bench, flashing badges. Prescott tried to maintain his composure. "This is highly irregular," he barked. "This is my courtroom." One agent stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Not anymore, Your Honor. Alton Prescott, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, judicial misconduct, and tampering with evidence in multiple cases, including this one." The room exploded. Shouts, gasps, camera phones raised like a wave. I sat frozen, gripping the arms of my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. Jasmine looked at me, her eyes wide with something between shock and vindication. Prescott stood, trembling with rage, as the agents cuffed his hands behind his back. "You can't do this," he roared. "I'm a judge. You hear me? I'm a goddamn judge." One agent leaned in close, voice low and merciless. "Not today, you're not." As they hauled him out, Prescott's eyes found mine. For a moment, all the arrogance drained away. All that was left was a bitter, broken old man who realized the world was finally seeing him for what he truly was. And I sat there, battered but unbroken, feeling the scales of justice finally start to tip. It wasn't a full victory. It never is. But it was a start. Maybe the first real one I'd had in a long, long time. The courtroom emptied fast, like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Reporters elbowed each other, microphones thrust forward, barking questions nobody wanted to answer. I sat still, gripping my crutches, while Jasmine gathered our files with trembling hands. She wasn't smiling. Neither was I. It was too raw for celebration. "You okay?" she asked quietly, crouching beside me. I shrugged, feeling the weight settle into my bones. "Ask me tomorrow." Outside, the sky had turned heavy with rain. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Someone thrust a microphone in my face. "Mr. Reed, how does it feel to see Judge Prescott arrested during your own trial?" I stared at them, the cameras, the questions, the sudden interest in a man they would have walked past a week ago without a second glance. "It's not about how I feel," I said, voice rough. "It's about why it had to get this bad for anyone to notice." Jasmine squeezed my shoulder gently, guiding me through the chaos. We made it to the parking lot, where my beat-up sedan sat like a faithful dog waiting to carry me home. "Be safe, Marcus," she said. "They don't like losing, especially not like this." Her words chilled me more than the rain. At home, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some congratulating, some apologizing, some pretending they hadn't vanished the minute my injuries made me inconvenient. I ignored them all. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my discharge papers from the Army, the medals tucked into a drawer nobody cared about. Thinking about all the times I swallowed rage because I was told that was strength. The knock on my door was so soft I almost missed it. When I opened it, Mrs. Palmer from next door stood there, holding a casserole dish. "I saw you on the news," she said, voice quivering. I'm so sorry for what they did to you. I nodded, too tired to speak. She thrust the dish into my hands like it could fix a lifetime. If you ever need anything, anything. I closed the door gently, set the casserole down without looking at it. It was strange how quickly people wanted to be on your side once the tide turned. The next morning, my face was everywhere. Local news, national news, social media feeds filled with hashtags I never asked for. Hashtag Justice for Marcus. Hashtag Prescott Exposed. Somewhere in some shiny TV studio, a panel of talking heads debated whether reverse racism was real. I changed the channel. By noon, Jasmine called. "We need to talk," she said. "Meet me at the DA's office." Walking into that building felt like walking back into enemy territory. The receptionist gave me a look, part curiosity, part disdain. "Mr. Reed, this way," she said stiffly, as if every word cost her pride. In the conference room, the DA sat stiffly behind a long table, his suit too sharp, his smile too thin. Jasmine sat beside him, her face a mask of cautious professionalism. "Mr. Reed," the DA began, folding his hands. "First, let me say, on behalf of this office, we deeply regret what you endured under Judge Prescott's courtroom." I said nothing. Let the silence speak for me. He cleared his throat. "In light of recent developments, all charges against you are formally dropped. Your record will be expunged." Still, I said nothing. He shifted uncomfortably. "Additionally, the city is prepared to offer you a settlement to avoid a prolonged civil rights lawsuit." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "How much?" I asked finally, voice flat. He named a figure, big enough to sound impressive on paper, small enough to be insulting when you considered what they tried to take from me. "Keep it," I said, standing up. "You think a paycheck erases this?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Reed, I'm not for sale," I snapped. Jasmine rose too, gathering her things with crisp, deliberate movements. "Come on, Marcus," she said. "Let's go." Outside, the sun burned down hard, blinding. "That settlement could have bought you a lot," she said quietly as we walked. "Yeah," I muttered, "but it wouldn't have bought me back." The days that followed blurred into a strange half-life. Some people treated me like a hero. Others treated me like a threat that got lucky. The VFW hall invited me to speak at a meeting. I almost laughed. They hadn't cared when I was sleeping in my car 2 years ago. But I went anyway. Maybe some young soldier needed to hear it. The room smelled of cheap beer and old leather. I stood at the podium, looking at faces lined by war and disappointment. I fought for a country that taught me how to shoot, how to survive, I said, voice steady. But it never taught me how to heal. A few men shifted uncomfortably. Others stared at their boots. "I don't want your pity," I continued. "I want your honesty. Because if we can't be honest about who we are, about what happens to men like me after the parade's end, then we ain't a brotherhood. We're just a lie in a uniform." Silence hung thick and heavy after I spoke. One old Marine with a silver beard stood up. His hands shook slightly. "Semper Fi, son," he said, voice hoarse. "You said what needed saying." Later, outside under the stars, Jasmine found me leaning against my car. "You sure you're ready for what's next?" she asked. I shrugged. Was I ever ready for any of it? She smiled sadly. "There's talk of a full federal investigation now. Into Prescott. Into the whole system." I nodded. Maybe it would change something. Maybe it wouldn't. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something crack open in my chest. Not hope exactly. Something harder. Something stronger. The beginning of a fight I chose this time. And this time I wasn't fighting alone. Started small. A whisper here. A rumor there. First about Judge Prescott. Then about other names, men and women in power who thought they were untouchable. Jasmine sent me an email late one night. A list of cases Prescott had presided over. Too many black defendants. Too many coincidental harsh sentences. We were never meant to win, I muttered to myself. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Until all I could see was a system that had been designed to break us slow, like water wearing down stone. The next day, I was called to testify before a state review board. Walking into that building, I felt the weight of it settle on me. The security guards looked at me the same way they always did, like trouble. Funny, I was still dangerous even after everything. Or maybe because of it. Inside, a long table of men and women waited, faces blank, pens poised. Jasmine stood behind me, silent, steady. My anchor. Mr. Reed, the chairman said. You're here to recount your experiences regarding Judge Prescott. Understand this is under oath. I leaned into the microphone. Understand this, I said. I buried brothers overseas only to come home and find out the war never ended. It just changed uniforms. A murmur went through the room. Jasmine squeezed my shoulder, a silent warning. But I was done being polite, done shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. I told them everything. The mockery, the sentencing, the way the court-appointed lawyer told me to plead out because men like you don't win trials. I could see it in their eyes, the way they shifted when the truth got too heavy. When I was finished, the room sat in silence. Nobody wanted to look me in the eye. Later that night, I got the first death threat. You should have stayed quiet, cripple. No return address. Just venom. I burned the letter in the sink. Watched the ashes swirl away like dead memories. But the threats kept coming. Voicemails. Messages. Dirty looks at the grocery store. You think you're some kind of hero? A man sneered one day in the parking lot. I think I'm still breathing, I said coldly. That's more than a lot of us get. Jasmine worried. I could see it in her face every time we met. You don't have to keep doing this, Marcus, she said one afternoon, her voice tight. You don't owe them your peace of mind. I smiled grimly. No, but I owe it to every kid coming after me. Every kid who's gonna walk into a courtroom thinking he's already guilty just because of the skin he was born in. She wiped at her eyes angrily. Damn you for being so stubborn. Damn me for surviving, I said softly. Weeks passed. Investigations deepened. Prescott's friends fell like dominoes. Prosecutor, a cop, a city councilman. Their secrets were too loud to hide anymore. But with every victory came another attack. Someone slashed my tires. Someone keyed liar into my car door. Someone threw a rock through my window at 2 a.m. Jasmine begged me to move. I refused. If I run now, I said, I teach them that fear works. Still, some nights I sat alone in the dark, crutch leaning against my chair, wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe it would have been easier to stay invisible. Then I remembered the veterans who slept under bridges, the teenagers with records for crimes they didn't commit, the mothers weeping in courtrooms while judges laughed. And the fire came back. One morning, I woke up to find the media parked outside my house. Not because of my case, because someone had leaked footage. Footage of Prescott making racist jokes at a private party. Footage that ended any chance of him spinning the story. The city erupted. Protests, marches, news anchors falling over themselves trying to act shocked. I watched it all from my front porch, sipping bad coffee. Jasmine showed up, breathless, holding her phone. "You're trending," she said, like worldwide. I raised an eyebrow. Should I be honored or terrified? She laughed for the first time in weeks. A real laugh, full and bright. "You're a symbol now," she said. "A symbol they can't erase." I thought about that. Symbols were easy to love, easy to forget. I didn't want to be a symbol. I wanted to be a man who made them listen. The mayor requested a meeting. Big office, big handshake, fake smile. "Mr. Reed, we owe you a debt of gratitude for exposing this injustice," he said, as if the words tasted sour. I said nothing. Let him squirm. "We're establishing a commission," he said quickly. "Police reform, judicial oversight. You'll be honored at the ceremony next month." "Honor me by fixing it," I said. "Not with plaques, with action." He nodded stiffly, not meeting my eyes. Jasmine drove me home. Neither of us spoke for a long time. At a red light, she glanced over. "You did it," she said quietly. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I started it. The real work was just beginning. I thought the worst was over. I was wrong." It started with a knock at the door around midnight. 3 sharp raps that made my stomach drop. I grabbed my crutch, limped to the door, and cracked it open just enough to see. 2 uniformed cops stood there, faces blank, hands twitching near their belts. "Marcus Reed?" the taller one barked. "Who's asking?" I said, heart pounding. "We need you to come with us. Now." "No warrant, no conversation," I said, starting to close the door. The other one shoved his boot in the frame. "We're not asking." I stared at them, a long, heavy stare, until one finally looked away. Behind them, Jasmine pulled into my driveway, headlights flashing. She jumped out of the car, phone already in her hand, filming. "Smile for the camera, boys," she said sweetly. "Let's make sure the world sees how heroes get treated around here." The cops stiffened. One muttered something under his breath, but they backed off. For now. After they left, Jasmine stayed. Sat on the couch across from me, legs bouncing nervously. "They're scared," she said. "You're dangerous to them now." I laughed bitterly. Imagine being afraid of a crippled man with a crutch and a conscience. "They're afraid of the truth you carry," she said fiercely, "and the fact that you're not alone anymore." I wanted to believe her, but paranoia is a slow poison, and it was seeping in deep. The next betrayal hit harder. Someone leaked a fake story to the press, accusing me of lying about my service, questioning my injury. I woke up to headlines screaming "stolen valor," pundits arguing about me like I was a chess piece on some rigged board. Jasmine burst into my house, furious. "They're trying to rewrite you," she said, slamming her laptop shut. "Turn you into the villain so they don't have to face what you exposed." I sat there numb. "I knew it was coming," I said. "Just didn't know it would hurt this bad." Because it did hurt. Worse than any bullet. Worse than any judge's sneer. It hurt because I'd bled for this country. And now they wanted to pretend I was just another liar. Another criminal. We fought back. Released my service records. Interviewed with sympathetic reporters. But the damage was done. Some people didn't want the truth. They wanted a villain they could sleep easy hating. I started seeing it in the grocery store again, the looks. Started hearing the murmured slurs when I walked past. The world didn't want complicated heroes. They wanted neat little lies. One night, sitting alone on my porch, I heard footsteps. Turned to see an old man approaching, slow and careful. Vietnam vet by the look of him. Hat low over his eyes. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "You Marcus Reed?" he asked, voice rough. "Depends who's asking," I said wearily. He chuckled, a dry sound. "Name's Otis. Served 69 to 72. Lost a brother in Nam. Lost my faith somewhere after." I nodded stiffly. He looked me over, eyes sharp. "You're doing what I should have done back then," he said. "Speaking up." I didn't know what to say. "You ain't crazy," he added. "And you sure as hell ain't alone." Then he turned and walked away into the night, leaving me sitting there, heart heavier and lighter all at once. 2 days later, a crowd gathered outside the courthouse, bigger than I'd ever seen. Hundreds of people, black, white, young, old, all holding signs. "Justice for Marcus. End the corruption. We believe you." I limped up the steps slowly, every ache and scar burning. Jasmine beside me, holding my arm. The news cameras swarmed. Flashes lit up the early morning sky like fireworks. At the top of the stairs, I turned and looked out over the crowd. They roared, a sound so full of pain, hope, rage, and love that it shook something loose in my chest. For the first time in a long time I felt seen, not just as a victim, but as a man. The trial began inside. Prescott sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller than I remembered, still trying to hold on to the arrogance that had once made him feel like a god in that courtroom. Now he just looked tired, broken. I took the stand, swore in. The prosecutor asked me to tell my story. Not the headlines, not the rumors. My story. I gripped the microphone and spoke. "Your Honor," I said, voice clear. "I fought for this country. I bled for it. I believed in it. And when I came home, men like him taught me the hardest lesson of all. That justice ain't guaranteed just because you wear the flag on your shoulder." Prescott flinched. The jury leaned in. I kept going, kept pouring every wound, every humiliation, every ounce of betrayal into my words. When I finished, the room was dead silent. Even the judge presiding now, a black woman with tired eyes, looked like she wanted to weep. When Prescott stood to defend himself, he stumbled over his words, mumbled about misunderstandings and harmless jokes. Nobody was buying it. Not anymore. The final blow came when Jasmine played the leaked footage on a giant screen. The racist jokes, the laughter, the arrogance. The jury didn't even look at him when the verdict was read. Guilty. The gavel fell. Prescott's face crumpled. And for once it was him being led away in cuffs. Him hearing the cell doors clang shut. Him learning what it felt like to be powerless. I walked out of that courtroom to cheers and tears. But the victory felt different than I expected. It wasn't joy. It was something deeper. Something heavier. Vindication, maybe, or survival. Jasmine hugged me tight outside the courthouse. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "We did it." And the fight wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. After the trial, everything changed. And yet, somehow, nothing did. I still woke up every morning with pain gnawing at my leg. I still fought that invisible war in my mind. I still limped into stores where people pretended not to stare. But now, There was something different burning inside me. A light I thought they'd extinguished a long time ago. Hope. It wasn't easy. The media tried to spin it. Some called it cancel culture gone too far. Others said Prescott was a good man who made a mistake. Funny how mercy only flows one way in this country. But I stayed focused, because the fight was never just about me. It was about every voice that had ever been silenced, every dream that had ever been dismissed, every life that had been broken under the weight of a crooked system. One afternoon, I sat down in front of a cheap camera and hit record. No fancy lights, no script, just me, raw, unfiltered, real. I told my story the way it deserved to be told. Not the way they wanted it rewritten. The way it was. The video went viral in days. Not because it was polished, but because it was the truth. People from all over the world flooded my inbox. Veterans, survivors, fighters, people who knew what it meant to be crushed and still rise. Jasmine helped me start a foundation. We called it Stand Tall. Scholarships for disabled veterans. Legal aid for victims of courtroom injustice. Mental health support for those fighting invisible battles. Every dollar, every hour, every ounce of energy we poured into it, it felt like stitching something broken back together. Slowly, painfully, but beautifully. One night, as I was locking up the little office we rented downtown, Jasmine stood next to me, arms crossed against the cold. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stood up that day?" she asked softly. I stared out into the empty street, lights flickering in the distance. "Yeah," I said. "I'd still be broken, but quieter, and alone." She bumped her shoulder against mine. "Not anymore. Not anymore. Because standing up cost me everything I thought I needed. Comfort, safety, reputation. But it gave me something I'd almost forgotten existed. Purpose. You see, when they mock you, belittle you, humiliate you, it's not because you're weak. It's because you terrify them. Because you remind them of the truth they're trying to bury. I learned that pain is the price of progress. And silence is the currency of oppression. I may have walked into that courtroom with nothing but a battered body and a bruised soul, but I walked out with my dignity intact. And no one can ever take that from me again. So if you're out there, feeling small, feeling invisible, feeling like the world has written you off before you even got the chance to speak, remember this. Your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter. And sometimes, it takes losing everything to realize you already had the only thing that really mattered. Your truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, if it moved you, if it made you feel seen, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because we rise not alone but together. And the more we speak, the harder it becomes for the world to pretend we don't exist. Stay strong, stay standing, and never, ever be afraid to take back your voice.